Tonight's bedtime story is called Little Miss Sunshine and the Three Bears, read by the same artists. One second. Miss Sunshine went for a walk in the woods, and because it was a lovely hot day, she decided to go for a long walk. She walked, and she walked, and she walked. And then suddenly the weather turned for the worse. A storm arrived with a great crash and boom of thunder. She ran through the woods looking for shelter from the rain, which she found in the form of a cottage in a clearing in the woods. She knocked at the door. "Come in," said a very loud, gruff voice. The door led into the kitchen, and sitting around the table were three bears, a big bear, a medium bear, and a little bear. On the table were 3 bowls of porridge, a big bowl, a medium bowl, and a little bowl. "We're just going out for a walk while our porridge cools down," said the middle bear. "You can stay here if you keep an eye on our porridge and make sure no one eats it." "Thank you, I will," agreed Miss Sunshine, and the 3 bears left. Bears do not mind the rain. Miss Sunshine settled down to wait, glad to be out of the storm. Suddenly the door burst open, and Mr. Greedy barged his way in. "Mr. Greedy, what are you—" began Miss Sunshine. Before she could finish, Before she could finish, Mr. Greedy spied the 3 bowls on the table. "Ooh, porridge," he cried. "I'm starving." "You can't eat that porridge," cried Miss Sunshine. But Mr. Greedy was hungry, and he didn't listen. The first big bowl he tried was too hot. The next medium bowl was too cold. But the last small bowl was just right. So right that before Miss Sunshine knew it, Mr. Greedy had finished it all. Mr. Greedy looked at the small empty bowl. "Well, that wasn't nearly enough for me," he said. "I'm off to find a bigger meal," and he left as suddenly as he had arrived. Mr. Greedy had hardly been gone a minute when the door was flung open for a second time, and in stumbled Mr. Clumsy. "Hello, Mr. Clumsy," said Miss Sunshine. "What brings you here?" "Ooh, my poor feet," he moaned. "I've been walking for miles. I need a rest." He went into the living room where there were 3 chairs. "You can't come in here," cried Miss Sunshine. But Mr. Clumsy didn't listen, and he sat in the big chair. It was too lumpy. Whew! The medium chair was too soft, but the small chair was just right. So right that Mr. Clumsy leaned back, but being his usual clumsy self, he leaned back too far, and with a loud crack, the chair broke. Mr. Clumsy jumped up and said that he had just remembered something he had to do very urgently, and he left. Poor Miss Sunshine. She looked miserably at the broken chair. What was she going to say to the 3 bears? It was then that Miss Sunshine heard a loud, gruff voice coming from the kitchen. "Who's been eating my porridge?" said the voice. "Who's been eating my porridge?" asked the medium voice. And then a tiny, squeaky voice said, "Who's been eating my porridge and eating it all up?" Then the 3 bears came into the living room. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" said the big bear. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" said the medium bear. "And who's been sitting in my chair and broken it?" cried the little bear. The 3 bears glared angrily at Miss Sunshine. "Not me," she cried. Just then the door flew open for a 3rd time. It was Mr. Lazy. He yawned. "It's time for my nap. I need a bed." "You're not sleeping in my bed." I boomed the big bear. "You're not sleeping in my bed," said the medium bear. "And you're not sleeping in my bed," squeaked the little bear. Mr. Lazy's face fell. "You can come and sleep at my house," said Miss Sunshine. The bears were happy to hear this, so Mr. Lazy and Miss Sunshine said goodbye and set off to her house. However, as you know, it was a very long walk, and Mr. Lazy kept having to stop for a quick 40 winks, so it was very late when they finally arrived. Late enough for it to be Miss Sunshine's bedtime, too. In fact, it was everyone's bedtime. Big Bear was in his big bed. Medium Bear was in his medium bed. Little Bear was in his little bed. Mr. Lazy was tucked up in Miss Sunshine's bed, and Miss Sunshine was on the sofa. Poor Miss Sunshine. Time for our top 10.